Salam sejahtera. Semoga kita semua dalam keadaan sehat. Perkenalkan, nama saya Anak Agung Ngurah Perwira Redi, dosen pada program studi Teknik Industri Fakultas Teknik dan Teknologi Universitas Sampoerna. Video ini dibuat untuk memenuhi salah satu persyaratan sertifikasi dosen tahun 2026, yaitu pernyataan diri dosen dalam UNJUK KERJA TRIDHARMA Perguruan Tinggi atau PDD-UKTPT, khususnya dalam bidang pengajaran. Pada kesempatan ini, saya akan menjelaskan secara singkat mengenai mata kuliah Object Oriented Modeling and Design yang saya ampu. Mata kuliah ini merupakan bagian dari mata kuliah inti Teknik Industri berdasarkan kurikulum inti program studi Sarjana Teknik Industri tahun 2022 yang disusun oleh BKSTI. Mata kuliah ini dirancang untuk membekali mahasiswa dengan kemampuan dalam mengidentifikasi kebutuhan, menganalisa, memodelkan, dan merancang sistem yang terdiri atas komponen perangkat lunak maupun non-perangkat lunak. Mahasiswa diharapkan mampu mempresentasikan sistem menggunakan Unified Modeling Language atau UML, mulai dari model bisnis atau kebutuhan, model use case, model analisis, model desain, hingga pertimbangan implementasi dan operasional sistem. Tujuan tersebut diarahkan untuk mendukung pencapaian-capaian pembelajaran lulusan atau CPL dan dijabarkan lebih lanjut dalam capaian pembelajaran mata kuliah atau CPMK pada dokumen rencana pembelajaran semester atau RPS. RPS merupakan kontrak pembelajaran yang disampaikan kepada mahasiswa dan disepakati pada pertemuan pertama perkuliahan. Mata kuliah ini memiliki bobot 3 SKS dengan pendekatan Project-Based Learning. Mahasiswa tidak hanya memperoleh materi berupa teori, tetapi juga mengerjakan proyek secara berkelompok yang mengilustrasikan proses bisnis, pemodelan, perancangan, dan pengujian sistem berdasarkan kasus nyata. Penyampaian materi perkuliahan dilakukan secara sistematis, sesuai dengan RPS. Materi yang dikembangkan berdasarkan buku-buku referensi yang menjadi standar dalam bidang analisis dan perancangan sistem, serta diperkaya dengan hasil penelitian saya bersama mahasiswa yang telah dipublikasikan dalam forum diseminasi internasional. Materi pembelajaran dikemas dalam bentuk PowerPoint slides, video pembelajaran, serta aktivitas pemodelan sistem menggunakan perangkat lunak, seperti Draw.io. Bahasa pengantar yang digunakan dalam perkuliahan ini adalah bahasa Inggris. Adapun struktur perkuliahan disusun secara bertahap dengan topik utama sebagai berikut. Pengantar UML, Unified Process, dan proses pengembangan sistem. Yang kedua, analisa kebutuhan fungsional dan non-fungsional. Yang ketiga, pemodelan use case serta analisis objek dan kelas. Yang keempat, relasi antar kelas, inheritance, dan polymorphism. Yang kelima, diagram aktivitas dan diagram sequence. Yang keenam, basis data, ERD, skema relasional, dan SQL. Yang ketujuh, antarmuka pengguna, wireframing, dan pengujian sistem. Terakhir adalah proyek akhir dan presentasi kelompok. Terkait interaksi pembelajaran, proses belajar mengajar menerapkan mekanisme blended learning. Struktur perkuliahan yang terdiri dari 14 minggu kegiatan pembelajaran, serta 1 pertemuan ujian tengah semester dan 1 pertemuan ujian akhir semester. Selain interaksi tatap muka di kelas, mahasiswa juga dapat mengakses materi berupa slide, video pembelajaran, instruksi tugas, serta sumber belajar lainnya melalui Learning Management System yang disediakan oleh Universitas Sampoerna. Mekanisme pembelajaran menerapkan pendekatan Student-Centered Learning untuk mendorong keaktifan mahasiswa melalui diskusi, tanya jawab, latihan individu, kerja kelompok, presentasi, dan penyelesaian case tadi. Dengan pendekatan ini, mahasiswa tidak hanya menerima informasi dari dosen, tapi juga aktif membangun pemahaman dan menghasilkan model sistem berdasarkan permasalahan yang dianalisa. Terkait asesmen atau evaluasi pembelajaran, penilaian dilaksanakan berdasarkan komponen tugas, kuis, ujian tengah semester, proyek kelompok, dan ujian akhir semester. Seluruh komponen penilaian diarahkan untuk mengukur pencapaian CPMK sebagaimana dijabarkan dalam RPS. Selanjutnya, mari kita simak cuplikan proses pembelajaran tatap muka pada minggu kedua mata kuliah Object Oriented Modeling dan Design yang membahas analisa kebutuhan serta perbedaan antara kebutuhan fungsional dan non-fungsional. Terima kasih. Good morning everyone. Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And you?
Great. So, are you ready to start the class?
Yes.
Great. So, today we are on the second week of our Object Oriented Modeling class. In this week, we are going to discuss this topic. It's so-called requirement analysis. Okay. But before we start today's class, maybe I would like to review a little bit on the last week materials. Anyone still remember about what we discussed about last week?
Benefit connection?
Yes. Next.
I think it's the system modeling of the diagram itself.
Yes, yes, great. We discussed a little bit on what UML is. It's a unified modeling language, which is used to as a visual language to represent how to develop a system. Anyone else remember what we discussed about last week? This one? Where it is?
It's like the stages.
The stages on developing a system. So we're also learning about several stages on develop system, which are requirements analysis, and then design, and then implementation and testing. Today, we're going to focus on the first part, which is so-called requirements. Okay? In requirements gatherings, okay, was one of the most important things that you need to do before developing systems. Developing systems you need to have a good ability to gather the requirements completely. So to put this into context, maybe let's have a bit of discussions on one of the systems that you maybe already often use. Okay, LMS, learning management systems. You do use LMS, right? Yes. Okay. What features or functions do you think are available in LMS? Yeah,
Taking an exam.
Yeah, you can use LMS to take an exam. Okay. Yes, Nurul? Submit assignment. Yes, Miguel?
To access the courses materials.
Access the course materials, correct. So I think we're all familiar with those functionality, those features, right? Now imagine you're going to develop those learning management system even more. So one of the first things to do is to gather the requirements on what kind of things you want to develop from those systems, right? So one of the ways to gather those functionality is through brainstorming, to asking the user on what could be improved. Now imagine I'm the project's developers, and then I want to ask you as the user, what kind of things you want to improve from the learning management systems? Any features or functionality that you want to add from the LMS? Yes, Azari? Oh, great ideas. AI chatbot, okay, very edgy, yeah. Yeah, Gil, you want to suggest something?
I think a GPA calculator that can calculate the prediction of your GPA.
Oh yes, yes. It's very important to get tracks of your GPA. So you want to have features that like predicts your GPA according to your progress in the class, right? Yes, Mia.
We are improving the user experience for the users.
Okay, this is a little bit different. So all of those were more on the functionality, right? So Miguel was suggesting more on the, hey, I want the environments of the systems to be improved. I want it is more easy to use, the usability. Okay, so now you are getting a little bit taste on what the requirements gatherings are. So basically, on these materials, those are the things that we are going to discuss. So basically, at the end of this class, the learning objective of this material is among these three. First, you will be able to identify general requirements from a system development. And then you will be able to explain what are functionals and then what are non-functional requirements. So all of those that you mentioned earlier were so-called general requirements. And then during the development of systems, we really need to have the ability to differentiate, to categorize those requirement statements into which one would be functionals developed by the developers on the system, which one will be the non-functionals, would be some things that the system should be able to have. Okay, next. So these are the contents of today's materials. It consists of 7 parts. First, we will talk about why it is important to understand what requirement is. Okay, and then to be more specific, what system requirement is. And then from these general system requirements, how to differentiate the functionals and non-functional requirements and compare different characteristics of those. And then we will have a bit of an interactive quiz to check your understanding about those functional and non-functional requirements. Then we can learn on how to improve the statements that you write so that requirements have more like clarity, non-ambiguity, objective. So the best practice on writing functional requirements and non-functional requirements. And at the end of the session today, we will have the summary and discuss what we have learned today, and also there is a homework. Yeah. This picture. Okay. Basically, in a system development settings, there are a lot of stakeholders will be involved, right? There could be the one that required or the user of the system. Okay. The team that develop the functionality, the additional features of the system. Normally, it will consist of project manager, somebody that talk to the user about what do you really want to be applied or to get the system have in their features. Right? So, and then this was the part that we will talk today, gathering the requirements. Okay, and this guy need to have the ability translating the requirements into more technical specifications. Therefore, the ability to translate from what the client wants into the functionality, the specifications, technical specifications, it is a very important ability. So that this kind of situations would not happen. What is this situation? This is an illustration on how it is very important to have the same page of understanding on the system requirements. Okay? So at the beginning, you know that the client may not have the ability to speak clearly about what they really want, right? Sometimes we face the situation where the things that client want is very ambiguous. Okay, is it this one or that one? Okay, therefore they describe it somewhat a little vague. Okay, and then the project leaders try to as much as his or her ability to understand those requirements. Then, based on this, the way he or she interpret might slightly different with what the customer described. Okay, and those gaps were continued through the development of those systems. So each of these creating more their own versions of what actually needed by the client. Okay, so it is very important that you have the ability to understand those system requirements in general and then transcribe it into what is the functional and then what is the non-functional requirements. Okay? Okay, now you know that in general, we can say that system requirements would be something or statements about what the system must do and how it should perform. Okay, so there is two parts here. What the system must do and how it should perform. Okay, it acts as a contract between the user and the developer of the system, and these requirements would be the basis of the system development, including how you design the system, the cost estimations, how we will test the systems. So these two statements, these two parts of the statement, which is what the system must do, will be categorized as functionals, and then how it should perform will be categorized as non-functionals. Okay, a bit more details on functional requirements. So in functional requirements, basically it would describe the system services, the actions, the behaviors of the system. Okay, so what the system could do would be the services, the actions that the system could do, the behaviors of the system. For example, earlier when you mentioned about, hey, I want the learning management systems to be able to submitting my homework or assignments. Those are what? Functional requirements. Okay. And then it usually include workflow, business process, validations, and output. So for example, validates login credential is a functional requirement. Send payment, okay, and then receive via email, functional requirements. Okay. Then, how do we differentiate with the non-functional requirements? Okay. So, besides what the system can do, you will also need to specify, right, the quality criteria or the constraints of the system. For example, hey, I want the learning management systems to be up running online 24 hours a day. Those are non-functional requirements. It's not about how the system will act, but more on the criteria, the constraints of how well the system can function. Okay, but not what does it do. Okay, so normally it can be categorized into the performance, security, availability, reliability, usability, scalability, maintainability, and compliance. Okay, for example, have you ever experienced accessing some website and then it took a very long time? Anyone? Yes. What kind of website? Oh yeah, because many users are using it, right? So in order to have your systems, let's say the ticketing system, to work well, so for example, one of the functional requirements need to be stated when it's developed was something like this. The checkout page response time should be less than 2 seconds or less than 1 second. Okay, those are the constraints or those are the quality criteria that we want to have in the system. Okay, so far, if I could summarize and compare functional requirements versus non-functional requirements, the focus of functional requirement is that it's about what the system does. Okay. Meanwhile, for the non-functional requirements, the focus is that how well the system works. Okay? And then in terms of the form of the functional requirements, normally it will appear in the form of a service, of an action, of a workflow. Meanwhile, for NFR, it will be about quality, constraint, performance criteria. And to test, again, when you create a system, you need to be able to know how to test those requirements that you create, right? So to test functional requirements, it will be based on the output. So to define a system, you have what is the input, what is the process, and what is the output. Functional requirement is testing what is the input to those functions, and then you test what is the output generating from those input. If it is accordance or confirm with the requirements, then you are having a good, you are able to implement the functional requirement correctly or properly. Meanwhile, for non-functional requirements, it is more tricky. For example, earlier you want to have like, hey, I want to have the system respond fast. The question is how fast, right? Is it 1 second is fast? Is it 0.5 seconds is fast? Then you need to have metrics. Or sometimes the metrics could be in a form of a benchmark. Okay, so for example, the average response time of a website in the world, the whole world will be, let's say, 0.1 second. Then those will be considered fast, something like that. And then here's are the examples. System validates login is a functional requirement. Login success within less than 2 seconds is a non-functional requirement. Up until here, any questions? So far so good? Okay. Now, if you don't have any questions, then I will ask you questions, okay? So let's check your understandings about these materials. Everyone, do you bring your mobile device, right? Okay. So I would like to invite you to join the in-class quiz session. So please enter the pin here. So later we will have like 5 questions to ask, to check your understanding about. We will have set of statement. And then you need to differentiate. Is this a functional or non-functional requirement? Okay. So earlier, remember the keyword. Functional requirement is about what the system do, right? What the system can do. And then non-functional is more like how well it should do it. Okay. It's more about the quality. It's more about the constraints related to the system. Functional or non-functional? The system shall store customer data in database. 5 seconds. Functional or non-functional? Ta-da! Wow, one and functional requirement because it shows what the system can do, storing data in the database. Okay, next. Okay, whoa, Max, congratulations. But Oliver, that's okay. You can have another chance, Oliver. Okay, next. System display login failed when the user enter wrong message. Functional or non-functional? Functional requirement. Wow. That's okay. I mean, like we can like I will explain some more for those of you that is not yet understood the materials. And then, oh, Max and Bill, Indah, Nathan. Okay. Next. Okay. Now next question. Fast in processing transaction. Okay. Okay, it's a trick. Oh, that's functional. Yay! Finally, everyone got it correctly. Bill is on fire anyway. Next, Max still on the top. Nah, checkout page response not exceeding 2 seconds. Functional or non-functional? Oh, it's maybe at the beginning, maybe you are not yet used to with the button, right? Okay. Okay, last question. Okay, this is your last chance to beat Max. Okay. Okay, next. Last one. Easy for new user to use. Functional or non-functional? What? Easy to use. It's more about the quality. So it's non-functional. Okay, let's see who's the winner.
Halo.
Number 3, Nathan. Yay, congrats, Nathan. Number 2, Bill.
Halo.
And finally, Max. Yay, congratulations, Max. But anyway, yeah, I think it's good. It's quite good. I know some of you still not get it correctly, but it's fine. Okay, you'll get used to it. So this is the answer. Well, despite of we are able to categorize this correctly, actually there still need to be improvement on this set of statements. Why is it? Because what we want, functional and non-functional requirements not to be ambiguous, not to be translated differently by different stakeholders, like what we have at the beginning, right? Take example like this one. System should be fast, okay? In order to translate fast into a real implementations, you may have different understanding about fast, right? what do you think? How many seconds is do you think is a fast response, Bill?
Less than 1 second.
Less than 1. What about next? What do you think? 0.5. See, even 0.5 difference in the understanding may lead you to set up using different type of a server specification, for example, code it differently, for example. So that's how you need to be more like specific in order to write down the requirements. Okay. So here we will discuss some of the best practice, okay, on writing a good requirements. Okay. Yeah. So first of all, normally we will use an active and specific verbs. Okay. Avoid ambiguous words. Okay. So for example, every requirements must be verifiable. Let's go back to the previous requirements. Fast. We are not going to be able to verify fast if we don't have the parameter to measure it, right? Let's say if you put 1 second as the parameter, so that would be the measurement unit that you want to achieve for those non-functional requirements, right? Okay, and then avoid statement like will, easy, secure, or some like words that will not be clear without the measures of the actions. Okay, and normally we will specify requirements into like one statement will be one requirement. Okay, normally we will not to have like 2 requirements in one sentence. That will be more difficult to understood to be tracked later on. And then keep the domain term consistent means that sometimes if a system have a lot of requirements, we are tempted to use different terminology for different requirements. Sometimes, for example, you use the terminology of user to represent one stakeholder, and then in another requirements you use terminology of customer, which actually represent the same entity. So be careful with that. Okay. And then more specific on functional requirements, it's not mandatory, but this is a good practice that is often implemented, which normally will have the sentence pattern, which guide you to how to write a system requirements. The first will be the system name, and then the degree keywords on like shall, can, must to reflect on how important these features or functionality need to be implemented, and then the main actions and the additional details. Okay. So example of a pure functional requirement will be something like this: shall store data. What kind of data, right? And then how they should store it, right? So you may want to devise this type of a sentence into like, okay, store new customer data. Okay, it's very specific, customer data in the database table after the user click register. Okay, very, very specific, so that it will be easy to implement later on by the developers. Okay, next on the non-functional requirements, basically it's the same thing, avoid ambiguity and then explain it as clear as possible. But some things that often forgotten is that you need to mention the metric or the threshold. It can be in a form of number, time, percentage, or score. And then mention in the testing condition. Okay. Earlier we discussed about fast, right? Fast. Display search result in less than 2 seconds. Yeah, something's measurable. Okay, yeah. Now we are at the end of the materials. I would like to summarize what we have learned today. Okay. So first is that we have discussed about requirements. In general, when you develop a system, you need to be able to translate what the user wants into requirements. Requirements are the several statements that mention about what the system must do, and then also how it should perform. Okay. The first part, what the system must do or should do, were some things that we call as functional requirements. And then the second part, and about how well the system should perform, would be the part of non-functional requirements. Okay. And both are equally important. Therefore, when developing a system, at the beginning, you need to be very clear about the functional requirements and non-functional requirements because it complements each other. Okay. And then requirement writings for both functional and non-functional should be clear, specific, and testable. Okay. And then, yeah, that would be some things that you can take from today's materials. Yeah, any questions? Yeah, yeah.
Can one system have both functional requirements and non-functional requirements?
Okay. Can one system have both functional and non-functional? Very good questions. The way I can answer this is, I think like when you conduct the requirement gatherings, of course, your user may not know, is this a functional or non-functional requirement, right? You are the one who need to able to identify. So when your user explain to you, as someone that developed the systems during the requirement gathering, you may figure out that he or she explaining one particular case that consists of both functional and non-functional requirements. For example, hey, the user may talk to me, let's say, sir, I want my login functions need to be like very fast. Like when I, let's say, login using fingerprints, it directly able to like instantly, right? That's the things that you can get from the user. But you as the system developer need to translate it like, okay, the user, the system should be able to have a login features through a fingerprints. That's number one, functional. Second one is that to translate fast, you need to have a benchmark. How fast a fingerprint login is currently available in the world right now. For example, you want to mention that, okay, the system should be able to provide a fingerprint login within like less than 1 second, for example, after your benchmarking. So both were in the same requirement statement, but you as the system developer need to be able to specify. Okay, they have two functions. First would be the functional one, second would be non-functional one. Okay, does that answer your questions? Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
So what if the user just asks, the system shall be easy, should be easy to use. How do you measure it?
Very good questions. Yeah. It is very often to meet clients or customers that they don't really how to be able to specify, but they know what they want, but they don't able to specify. Let's say I want it to be easy to use, but the question is easy is a very subjective, right? So therefore, if you go back to the previous summary, you need to go back to this one, clear, specific, and testable. So you need to be able to translate. Okay, if you mean by easy, I can translate it into like able to be measured using some metric. For example, we do have metrics so-called system usability scale. So it's a measurement for how easy your system is. So there is a set of questionnaire you can test the user on how the ease of use of the system. Normally the scale will be from 0 to 100, and then after you deliver those measurement tests, SUS tests, to the user that using the system, if you get the score, let's say more than 80, you can consider that your system is easy to use. So your job as a system developer is to translate the requirement into something that's clear, specific, and measurable. I think we are out of time already. I think I do still want to explain one more things before we finish. Okay, so today's materials is about functional, non-functional requirements, and then I want you to really experience on gathering those requirements in the practice. So you will have a homework. It's a group homework. Let's assume that you are going to develop LMS, like what we have discussed earlier. So one of the way to gather requirements on how to develop this learning management system, of course, to ask the user. So you will learn on how to conduct interview. Okay, so please conduct interview appointments. Maybe one of the user would be, we do have student as the user, but now I want you to see from the lecturer, which also the user of LMS, right? So see from a lecturer perspective, identify his or her requirements on how he or she wants the LMS to be improved. Okay, and then along with the interview, prepare the questionnaire, and then consists of that may help you to define the requirements of the system. And then from the interview, you need to write a report. And I want the report to in this format. Okay, you do have the interview result, questionnaire result, the requirement analysis, and then the appendix on the transcripts that you use for the interview. Okay, so any questions for this? Okay, so with that, I think we are at the end of the class. I think it's a very, very good participation. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening to today's presentation. Okay, yeah, good morning, everyone. Okay.